Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm joined by Daniele Fusetto and Robert Adducci. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, good. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Hi everyone.
And today
Great.
we're here to talk about a upcoming Kickstarter, Blood Sword. But before we start and get into that, if each of you would just introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about you. Start with you, Daniela.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. Sorry for my English. I'm not an English speaker. I'm from Italy, and I am a corporate storyteller and a narrative designer professor at Milan here in Italy. And during the night, I am a tabletop RPG designer. I also translated some tabletop RPG games, Big Smoke, Dialect, and Blades in the Dark, and from English to Italian. And then I sometimes stream in Italian with a bunch of friends, and I do one page TTRPG live on Twitch, and that's it.
Nice, thank you. And I assure you that your English is far better than my Italian. So,
Hey, everybody. I'm Robert Adducci. I am a social media manager for the RPG industry. I've worked for a bunch of different companies. I also am an author and designer. I've worked for Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, Cold Press, Rob Schwalb Entertainment, Redifius, a few others. Yeah.
yeah, you've been around for a while. I know. We've been interacting since almost the beginning of Nerdarchy. I feel like so you've been a staple in the industry for sure. So what do you guys want to tell me about Blood Sword?
Well, there's a lot to take to talk about Blood Sword. Really, a lot to talk. First of all, Blood Sword is a established EP, is a game book saga from Dave Morris and Oliver Johnson. It was a saga of game books in the 80s, and it had a new run, a new edition in the I think 2018. And the new edition went on Kickstarter, and it was translated in Italy by Librarsi Edizioni, Librarsi Editions, and it got a lot of attention because here in Italy there is a sort of game book renaissance. So a lot of people are really, really into game books. Lucky me, I am a huge Lone Wolf fan and also Blood Sword fan. And we are doing the fifth edition adaptation, or maybe it's better to say that we are adapted the fifth edition to Blood Sword and making a new iteration of the brand. So it's not like taking the old Blood Sword and just abruptly porting it to fifth edition. It's more like a new nuanced version, which is a green dark fantasy, really more focused on the main characters and on the battle of the true magi, which is the evil of this land. And we are so happy to return to the lands of legend, and that's mostly the easiest way to put the game together.
So is it a campaign setting for 5e? Is it its own game, kind of run off the 5e mechanics?
Yeah, we are taking some basic mechanics of the fifth edition, thanks to the the LGL and the SRD, and we are adapting it to the four main character class of the Blood Sword saga, and we are also talking about expanding the universe of Blood Wars. In Blood Wars, there were four major classes, which are the fighters, the sage, which is a sort of monk with healing powers, the trickster, which is a sort of supernatural thief, and the enchanter, which is like the sorcerer, and we have adapted it to the sorcerer. And we are trying to give the same feeling of the game books by making the adventures. So it would be an handbook with the rules and the adventure setting. So you have all the kind of, the same events, more or less, of the game books ported in fifth edition with some differences, of course. And we have adapted the mood and atmosphere from the game book to the fifth edition, And you will also be able to play other classes from classic 5th edition D&D. And so the druids, the barbarians, the bards, which are really important in Blood Sword. And yeah, most of all, there is the basic system, and we added some little things that made the Blood Sword iteration, the 5th edition iteration, a bit more cruel and a bit more also deadlier, if I can say it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult to remain alive in Blood Sword.
Robert, were you a fan before coming onto the project? Because I see you have a book there, but I also know as gamers, we also end up with a lot of books, and sometimes we don't get to explore as much as we would like.
Definitely. So, I had not heard of Blood Sword before being introduced to the project, but I quickly picked up the book. This is the first one, The Battle Pits of Karth. And one of the cool things about it when I started reading it and playing it is that it's not only, like the old choose your path adventures and things like that. It is that. So you have like the numbered, paragraphs that you got to read through. But one of the cool things about it is a lot of those, at least in my experience, the lone wolf books and whatnot, you're pretty much playing by yourself. And occasionally you have like a little companion or something. But this game is set so that you could actually you could play it with multiple people at the same time. So like you're actually playing with a group of people. And so you have different characters with different classes and different abilities, which is cool. And so they, it already was a sort of role-playing game before, but now they've, the crew, this Italian crew has really kind of put together a cool game. The thing that I loved about it immediately that when they shared some of the art, like the art is really sort of just got that crisp lines, the kind of dark style. It's very, the whole world is very grimdark, which I really like. I like dark fantasy, and the rules that they've added in are, definitely give you that dark fantasy feeling, but also give you like they do a bunch of really cool things. They have something maybe Daniele can talk about the blood dice.
Yeah, we added some mechanics to take the mood of the game book. So first of all, the Blood Sword Saga was the first game book series which could be played with multiple players. And it's very interesting because a lot of game books, as Robert said, were just you and the book, and in this one you had the ability to activate some paragraphs only if you had in the party some classes and some objects. So it was a really huge work. I think that Dave Morris and Oliver Johnson did an amazing job shaping these paragraphs. Sometimes it feels like wonderful to see that they did it in the age in which computer was not something like well spread, because how you do this, there are a lot of loops and a lot of parts of the games that are amazing, and we try to evoke that feeling by adding a die which is called the blood die, which is a simple d6 die which has 3 sided with a red sword, the blood sword, and 3 sided with light blue broken sword. This die is not rolled every time, it's put on your character sheet, and you begin the session or the campaign with the red sword. The red sword is called Audacity, and the broken sword is called Shiver. And this is a state in which the character can be. When you are in Audacity, your critical hit is more powerful, and sometimes you can also extend the effect of your spells. And where you are shivering, in the contrary, the critical hit of the enemy have an extra effect, and sometimes you need to extend the effect of the spell that are hindering you. Also, the rest. In Blood Sword 5th edition, we do not have the short rest, there is only the long rest. So it's really a strategic game where to put the rest. If you have the rest while you are audacious, the rest is all half, so you can rest in 4 hours instead of 8, and sometimes you have some boost in the healing. And if you instead rest during your shivering status, the rest is uneasy. So sometimes you cannot do something like, for example, the Great Master Cat is the name of the master in the edition, can say to you, you cannot harmonize, you cannot heal yourself, or maybe you cannot rest perfectly, and so you cannot recover your features. And that's really something that, for me, as a player of the first Blood Sword, reminds me the feeling of the player once you turn the pages and you cannot say the mood that you had when you turned the page set the choice that you did. So if you just hit an enemy and beat an enemy, and you were like in a sort of happy place because you finally have a success in the game book, you probably would choose something different instead of having beaten, or maybe have flee, because you can flee in Bloodward a combat. Maybe your state of mind could be a little more gloomy, and so this is like a way to take that player state of mind and bring it to the characters.
So we had a couple questions from the chat. Some good questions. I want to grab real quick. So Brian, game books were always solo experiences. Has that been retained? Are you able to place any solo Blood Sword with 5e mechanics?
Well, at first we wasn't thinking about it, but then when we meet Robert, we were like talking about, well, there are a lot of adventure for 5th edition which has solo adventure, and so why not? And so maybe in the Kickstarter there will be some surprises about some stretch goal, maybe some additional information, additional rule to play 5th edition Blood Sword by your own without any party at all.
When does the Kickstarter drop?
Well, the Kickstarter drop in June, mid-June. The date is around the 15th of June. There is no certain date for this moment. I cannot say the certain date, but it's mid-June. And we are trying to launch it.
Right now we have links in the description, one of which is so you can sign up to be notified when the Kickstarter launches. If you want to check that out more, feel free to. Dave wants to know, how 5e compatible will it be? More like a setting, or more like Adventures in Middle-earth, where it's a self-contained game, just run off of the 5e mechanics?
Well, I am a huge fan of the Adventures in Middle-earth. It's one of my favorite settings. And this will be a sort of half and a half, is a sort of midpoint between Adventures in Middle-earth and 5th edition compatible. Because some decisions that we made in Blood Sword were more like we adapting the 5th edition to the game books, and not the game books to the 5th edition. For example, the backgrounds of Blood Sword, which are called guilds and not backgrounds, because your background is your guild. You have a past experience which is tied up with your training. Backgrounds are more powerful than the one in 5th edition, and there is an additional information here. The background changes based on the classes that you choose. So if you chose to be, for example, an adventurer, fighter, the adventurer is like different for the guild that you choose. And so this is like something different from the 5th edition. But you can bring a class from 5th edition to Blood Sword. So you can do a druid with all the feature of the 5th edition inside the Blood Sword world.
So I have a question for you guys. This is like a grimdark fantasy setting. How do you execute grimdark in your games without like going full on edgelord? What is like the sweet spot?
My God.
I think, I like dark games. And so I think it just sort of depends on what aspects you like of it. So like for me, if I'm running a game, a dark game, like for example, Shadow of the Demon Lord, which is a super grimdark game, I just like blood and gore, and so I just describe a lot of that, and I kind of just describe how stuff is, you know, dark, and you know, maybe you see dead bodies everywhere or whatever, like whatever those aspects are. But that doesn't mean that like everything is just always deadly and kill all the time. Like there's still got to be some levity, because I think that is how you get sort of, you know, to know your nose, to know your lows, you've got to have some highs too. So I think having a little bit of both is fine, but then, you know, that way you can lay on the darkness a little bit more if you've got some levity in there.
Yeah. I am more a fan of there is always something worse than death. So sometimes I focus my green dark sessions as a DM on atmosphere, or really a lot on atmosphere and scene and how the scene is built. And even for Blood Sword, I think there is a mixture of how the adventure is has a specific tone, and how it's set in specific places of Blood Sword, of the lands of legend, which are really grimdark. So in a lot of swamps, a lot of mist lands, and a lot of also Iceland, for example. And at the same time, is the mechanics that really allows you to be more grimdark, not just because the rules make your character more willing to die, more able to die, but also because they really paint the way the DM, the Grandmaster, tell the scene and describe the scene based on the atmosphere, and the blood dice allows you to do that. If all the party is shivering, the success of the failures of a check is not going to look the same if the party is all audacious, of course.
So Brian wants to know, can you please share your favorite creature design that can only be found in Blood Sword? I'm a sucker for monsters.
Oh my god. I have to think about it because there are too many. Well, one of the coolest monster that I remember from my childhood when I played Blood Sword. I played Blood Sword for the first time on an English edition at the house of my DM of the time, because I didn't have the book at all. And then I bought some Italian version. And in the first book, there is an enemy that you can encounter in any, for whatever the class you choose. It's not the same enemy, it's a different enemy, but as a particular element. The statistic of the enemy are the statistic of the character when he began the adventure. That really struck me in this time, because you are facing like a sort of shapeshift, a sort of doppelganger of you, but the name is different. So it's someone from your past that has been brought to the death from the death by the villains, which has the same statistic of you with some differences, of course. And it's like, well, it's genius. It's really genius. It's very, I don't know how to say, it felt so frightening. Like I'm battling myself. I'm battling my own character. And if I die, it's like my character killed himself. Like that's really, really, really hard to reach.
Yeah, I feel like the reverse mirror, or the mirror version of yourself, is like a tried and true trope, right? Mm-hmm. So I could see why that would be a favorite. Yeah, I remember like some of my early gaming days. One of the things the GM did was have us all face ourselves at some point. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's also a great trope in science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave wants to know, do you have the rights to the original books? Could that maybe be available as part of the Kickstarter?
Well, we have a partnership. So the Blood Sword 5th edition is a project by Tambù, which is an Italian publisher, and Edizioni Librarsi, which is the Italian publisher of the original game books and the new one of the new game books. The original game books were for a publisher that closed like the first years of the 2000, I think. And so we have the ability to do some stuff. I don't know if there will be The ability to to have the game books during the Kickstarter is something that we talk about. I don't know the specific, but one thing that I can say to you, which is a spoiler, so don't say it too loud, because I heard my bosses that is like talking to me like, don't say it, but I will say it. There will be 2 rule sets in the Kickstarter. There will be the 5th edition, and there will be an additional rule set by Mauro Longo, which is an author well known here in Italy, which is a sort of old school Renaissance, old school style of rule set, which is long. I think is 50 pages, 60 pages long, and you can have it, and you can play the OSR version, or you can play the 5th edition version, and that's really cool for me.
Nice.
Oh, nice. Are either of you guys a fan of OSR games?
Yeah.
I like the style. I grabbed what did I grab? I can't remember which one, but I've grabbed a couple of them from Drive-Thru RPG, and I've been wanting to play them, but I have not played just so many 5th edition games.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. There's far more games that I want to play than I have time to play.
Yeah.
And I haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to the OSR games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have an OSR expansion which is called Neverland that I want to buy since I think 1 or 2 years. I saw it some years ago, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. But for now, I'm just playing like Knave, like the Black Hack. I have a friend that is a huge fan of the Black Hack, and maybe how is it called? Maze Rats, probably.
I don't know that one.
Probably Maze Rats, which is very, very cool.
Okay.
And yeah.
Oh yeah, Maze Rats. That's
Maze Rats, yeah.
Questing
okay.
Beast, right?
Yeah.
Ben from Questing Beast, I think. Yeah. Wrote that. Yeah. Yeah, I think he's done pretty well with it. Not too long ago, we actually had someone on that they successfully did a Kickstarter for a cyberpunk OSR game, which I was kind of surprised, because it feels like that's something a little more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of simplicity when I think of OSR.
Yeah.
But I could also be completely wrong, because when I think of OSR, I tend to think of like the Back Me stuff.
Right.
Because I haven't had a whole lot of time to explore some of the OSR stuff out there. So what is the gaming scene like in Italy?
Well, it's really hard to give you a short scenario, short description on the scene.
And also, I mean, pre-apocalypse.
Pre-apocalypse, pre-lockdown.
Yeah.
Oh, well. We are doing really great. We are the market here in the tabletop RPG are getting even more mainstream, which can be something good and something bad at the same time. But it's going very well. So I published my game in 2018 here in Italy, and since then it's a really huge. There is a really huge community, and you have the OSR community, the typical traditional games, and also a very strong indie community here in Italy. And there are also some Kickstarter made from Italy that are really had a really huge success. For example, Inferno for 5th edition, but also Broken Compass and Broken Tales, which are two titles that closed the Kickstarter, I think, yesterday or some days ago. And it's doing great. We are really, I know, first of all, it's a small community of authors. So all authors know each other. So we have like, I don't know, 60 authors in Italy about tabletop RPG. So we know each other very well.
Yeah.
And we are rooting for each other most of the time, I think. And it's great. It's great to see Italian product make their road in English. And I think there is a lot of people in Italy that are very, very creative. And there are also a lot of players, a huge amount of players, and people are playing even more and even more, even, in their home. And also a bit on, Twitch and YouTube live. There are some channels that are bringing tabletop experience on live. And so it's it's really it's really growing. It's really expanding. We are so grateful to have this opportunity. This period is very prolific. So let's hope it will last.
When you game, do you usually game in Italian or English?
So I usually gaming in Italian. Sometimes I had I had some tables in English and some experience in English, but really short one. And sometimes we use English handbook. So I learn English from three things: American TV series, Magic the Gathering, and tabletop RPGs. Because a lot of a lot of cards in Magic and a lot of handbooks were not translated in Italian, and some titles are still waiting for a good translation in Italian too. And so we needed to learn English to survive in a sort of way. There are some people that are not so good with English, and so sometimes the DM or the facilitator, if you have a GM less game, helps a bit the party with the English stuff. But yeah, sometimes we use the English materials and we role play in Italian. That's very cool.
Yeah, I was always surprised because at how many international folks play more in English than they do in their native tongue. And
Yeah.
I thought it would be the other way around. I've even had one of the people I was talking told me like they felt weird role playing in their native language, and it felt more comfortable to do it in English for some reason.
That's interesting.
Well, I feel comfortable in my own language because I have the feeling when I speak in English that sometimes I still translating Italian words in English. I'm trying to speak directly in English, but sometimes there is a switch in my mind and I do mistakes. But fun fact, I know some guys here in Italy that are role playing online with people abroad in Italian. So maybe with people in Japan, but in Italian. So it's very strange. It's very weird. But we have Italians are all over the world, and most of the time Italians bring their own tabletop RPGs, and they evangelist of the things.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I guess also it just depends on how widespread the hobby is in any given country as well.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious about that. And also when I encounter people that speak multiple languages, I always wonder and often ask, what language do you think in?
Well, I try.
But
to
you
think
just
in
said you
English.
translate to Italian, so yeah. But mostly when I meet people here and they speak different languages, and when people speak like multiple languages, like to me is like so impressive because I barely can understand. I can barely grasp English.
Well, my girlfriend is she knows 5 languages, and she is a translator and an expert in languages. So a lot of times she's in the other part of the room and she shouted me. It's not you can say it like adjust your pronunciation. And so I try sometimes to think in the language that I'm speaking in.
Yeah.
And so I really try to speak English. Also, like memorizing and like trying to use, words that I heard before from friends or from TV. But it's really hard sometimes. And when I'm tired, the Italian things came out, and it's more like I don't know. It's like I feel I'm doing the imitation of myself in English. I don't know how to say it.
Nice.
So Dave has another question in the chat. Will the old Dragon Warriors fluff be useful in this game?
No. Dragon Warriors is like a twin setting of Blood Sword, but from Dave Morris, directly from Dave Morris, I heard him say it, so I'm allowed to say it. It's like the tone is totally different. So Blood Sword has the minimalistic approach, so the world designing. If you can't take the pieces of the Blood Sword together and use the power of the Sword of Life to beat the true magi, beat the enemy, the world is done, the world is lost forever. And so, as a really true grim dark approach, Dragon Warriors is more an heroic approach of the world, and also a bit more like the classic fantasy world, with a small difference that we keep in both worlds. All things that are fairies, so elves, dwarves, all the creatures of the fairies are a bit less common than the usual fantasy setting. So if you encounter an elf in Blood Sword, like in Dragon Warriors, it's like, whoa, it's a elf. So she's a elf, it's a elf. So it's like, oh my god, I'm in the presence of something really rare, of someone that is really, it's not someone that you can encounter usually. And a lot of characters in Blood Sword 5th edition, a lot of intrepid ones, are elves of dwarves, because there is a lot of humans in Blood Sword 5th edition has the ability to to be a bit racist towards other races. And so sometimes elves and dwarves found themselves in the intrepid ones, which are like the mercenary that you send to suicidal missions and whatsoever. And there is also so that the team of mm, there is this element of you are all alone with your values, with your virtues against the dark true mages, which is not the tone of Dragon Warriors. Dragon Warriors is more like we go out and we go on adventure and so on. I am a fan also of Dragon Warriors, so
Were you disappointed that it wasn't going to be included,
well,
or
yes and
maybe
no.
possibly an expansion in the future?
Yes and no. I don't think that some stuff of Dragon Warriors can apply really well to Bloodward, because I always thought that if you take out from Bloodward the millennialistic element, so they think that the world will end if you don't bring this world of life back together. I I thought, well, the word doesn't exist. The main important element, the thing that is for me attractive of Blast War is that element. So Dragon Warriors is a very good game. I had some games with Dragon Warriors in the past, but it's like more for me, of course, is my humble opinion. It's more like classic fantasy, low magic, low fairies fantasy setting. Bloodsword for me is the green dark of Bloodsword is more intriguing. So yeah, yes and no.
So, Robert, coming onto the project and learning about Blood Sword, what were some of the cool discoveries you made?
Uh, I really like the sort of way they're doing kind of, in sort of like your classic D&D, people are just sort of from all over the place, and that's still the case here. You definitely have characters from all over the place, but they're called intrepid ones here. So your group of intrepid ones are called your pack, and so it's much more cohesive in that way, where like you have a specific thing you're doing, even though you're not necessarily like every pack is not going to be doing the same thing, but your packs are generally kind of hired by these lord knights to do the jobs that nobody else will do, or that they don't want to send their own trusted people on. And so you're sort of this sort of low mercenary group is basically what you are. You could be a bunch of killers and assassins and things like that, and you're sent to basically on suicide missions or whatever. So I just like that aspect of, it's got that very Black Company kind of feel, if you're familiar with those books, where you're sort of like a mercenary group just sort of doing what you can do. And that also means that like you're outsiders, almost automatically, because regular people know, oh, there's a pack here, like there's going to be trouble, and that's sort of what really happens in D&D, but we don't play that ways a lot of times you're just like, oh, you're just adventurers wandering around. Well, here it's like, oh great, there's a pack coming, there's going to be problems,
Trouble.
people are going to die.
Yeah.
People are going to die. Yeah. So I really like that. As far as like the whole overall feel of characters, I also like they've got a cool thing called Crossroads, which are which is mechanically, a thing that we do all the time, sort of like not thinking about it, but it kind of goes back to the game book aspect where like you have a decision point, like they're definitive decision points, and they sort of, they just give you advice on how to structure them. So it's like, okay, you have this specific problem that you have to overcome. Here are, here's a bunch of ways you can get around it. Here's a hint on how you can solve it. If you succeed, this happens. If you fail, this happens. So it's even though we do that all the time in role-playing games, it's just more definitive and more written out, which I think helps game masters to have those really branching storylines that people enjoy. Whether it's from a decision or from a die roll, it can completely change the game.
That's an interesting point, because that is something that is rarely taught in game systems. And, but it comes up and we all have to figure it out as the GM.
Yeah.
At some point or another. Like I remember going from like where I used to write out adventures as if they were, a pre-written adventure, module or adventure with flavor text and everything, to like I would then just do like bullet points and flow charts, and the flow charts were basically at the crossroads of where do I perceive that they could go from here. So that would be super helpful, especially to a new GM, instead of getting flustered in the moment when the players do something they weren't expecting. But if the book kind of tells you, look, here's these decision points, I can see that as a valuable tool.
Yeah, and in this way we are trying to, in the handbook of Blood Sword, you will have the story of the first three books retold in a new way with some new events. And so this crossroads allows us to take some of the major encounters, which are not combat encounters, and have them in 5th edition with the mood of the game books. However, the Grandmaster can create his own crossroads and make the story house the way he or she want. That's really cool for me.
So Dave wants to know if you can spill any stretch goals.
Well, there will be for sure some stretch goal about the amazing art. We have so wonderful artists in the project. So for the quick start, we have some really, really good art from, the maps are from Moreno Paisano, which is an Italian art worker, which is very, very good. I really love his maps. And there will be some additional artwork from Mirko Mastrocinque, which is the layout artist also. And we have illustration by Russ Nicholson, which is the original illustration. Eric Sigigel, I hope to say the surname really well, and Mattia Simone. And maybe some more, maybe some guest artists, I don't know if I can say it. And there will be also some additional feature for classes, maybe some archetypes. I can say no more thing. Just it.
Folks will have to tune in and watch to see what happens.
Yeah.
So Brian wants to know, how involved is character creation and how is character death treated? 5e has so many lifesavers. It feels antithetical to grimdark or dangerous.
Well, that's a really good and interesting question, which is very, very long. Can you repeat it?
So I guess like we can break it down into, one, like what do you do? What does Blood Sword do to make it feel more dangerous? Like you mentioned.
Oh yeah.
You've mentioned the rest already. You removed the short rest.
Yeah.
There's the long rest, and there's also, it seems like, some tools for the GM to be like, these benefits you normally get on your long rest, not going to happen this time.
Yeah. There is an additional condition which is called psychic exhaustion. In Blood Sword, there is the psychic points, which we will bring again in 5th edition with a different approach. Psychic point can be used by all characters, but not all classes will have psychic points. And there is also the additional condition, which is psychic exhaustion, which work like the exhaustion, the classic exhaustion. It has 6 levels, but instead of the classic exhaustion, it doesn't kill you. It begins with like shivering and making things harder for you, and it ends up that when you have the 6th level of psychic exhaustion, you flee every encounter you make, and so you are so in a paranoid state that you are not willing to fight anymore. We also added to give you the sense of, it's like, it's not like an OSR experience in which you will frequently die. It's like a sort of OSR light. It's like you have a lot of threat of death, but sometimes you can just save yourself at the last moment, and then you feel the weight of the toll on the character. So for example, you can flee from a combat, but if you feel, you re-roll your blood die, and if you shiver, your flee will be like you will be chased by the thoughts that you could make things different. So you will enter a sort of paranoid state, and probably you won't be able to rest at all. So if you flee here, it's like, okay, I hope to have audacity, because if I flee, I'm shivering. It's like, okay, it's done, probably. Or maybe there is always something worse than death, of course.
And looking at, there's a lot of, they've added a lot of kind of optional rules to kind of give that darker feeling. So you've got rough magic. So if you fail to cast a spell, you can become shivering. He talked about the psychic exhaustion, which like at level 1, you have like uneasy rest, so you don't rest as well. At level 2,
the dramatic initiative. I maybe we can explain it, which is a very simple tool. When you make the initiative and you use the optional rule of dramatic initiative, any intrepid that has the shiver status goes down in the list of the initiative after the monster. So it's like you are splitting the list of characters during the initiative. So there is the intrepid one with audacity and the monster, and after the monster there will be all intrepid with shiver. So if all the pack is shivering, the monster act first, and that's really something I think a bit pushing on the character and the players. Like, oh my god, I cannot start a fight like in this state, so I need to find a way to re-roll my dice, my blood dice, and hopefully get the audacity back.
And there's also, I like the escape. So basically monsters have escape effects, and they tell you sort of how you can escape if you have to, or what happens if you try to escape, or how you can escape. And so it's not just like, oh, it's dangerous, I'm going to run now. Like there's consequences to getting into combat.
Oh, that's a cool mechanic. Off the top of your head, do you bring any of those specifics to mind? Examples?
Example on the flee mechanic, on the escape mechanic. Yeah, well, we have the main villain of the adventure in the Kickstarter, which is going out in the next day, tomorrow on in the next day, which has the ability you can escape. It transports you in a sort of swamp with a mist wall, and if you look closely to an environment, you can get like a hint of a magical door, and if you find it and you have the ability to find it quickly, you can escape from it. But if you fail to escape, you will find yourself inside the middle of the swamp of Krart, the doom plains of Krart, and you will have to go back by foot, and it's a long way in a very terrible land. So that's like really you don't want it to happen. So sometimes even escaping is like you need to be lucky, or you need to find the best strategic way to escape.
It almost makes me think of the bad stuff from Munchkin.
Yeah.
One of the things I also like is there's like a way, like if you're getting psychic exhaustion, you can instead of taking a level, you could say like, I want to gain a fear instead of taking a level of exhaustion. And so then you get a fear that is kind of like always with you, kind of like
Yeah.
a madness sort of in regular 5th edition.
Okay, like a permanent insanity.
Yeah. You can get the fear out if you, but the player needs to address the fear. So if you say to the Grandmaster, I think that element, the monster, that object is part of my fear, and you willingly you take a saving throw willingly, you can try to have a success and to try to develop a sort of, I'm trying to get the fear out of my body, but you need to strike 3 times a success in this type of saving throws to get the fear out. You can always play with the fears, and so hope that the Grandmaster can won't put some fear frightening element inside the scene.
So what are some of the elements that let you know you're playing in Blood Sword, a different kind of world than maybe players are used to? Like already we know from what you've told us that it's kind of xenophobic in its approach with different peoples. But what else can you tell us about the world?
Well, the world of Blood Sword is very dark and is a feudalistic world. And there is a sort of huge empire which is loosely based upon the Roman Empire, which has fallen in the last years, and there is a new empire, the new 17 empires. This empire has a sort, as conquered by force or by economics, diplomacy, all the reign of the north. And so each reign has a ruling knight. The ruling knight is like a king in that reign, but need to pledge fealty to the emperor, of course. And that kind of reflects on the people. There is a lot of status also in the kingdoms. Not all the kingdoms are treated equally in the empire. Some kingdoms are like more, favorite to the emperor. Some kingdoms are like, just take your ruling knights and go to your way. And this reflects on the life of the intrepid ones. The intrepid ones are like the mercenary, that the people that no one wants around, that the ruling knights are willing to sacrifice in suicide missions instead of their own people, like nobles and of course people of high ranks. And also people are afraid of the intrepid ones, because intrepid ones and packs have this sort of legendary aura of making problems wherever they go. And so, or maybe they are in a suicidal mission and they are in a suicidal mission and you don't want to be a sort of a victim of the action. The only thing that is saving you sometimes is your guild, not all the times. The guilds has like of sort of save points in all the city, which is called den. In some city you can enter a den without any trouble. In some city, dens are forbidden, and so they are like in the back of a shop or a town or a pub town. And so this allows you to feel the pressure on the lives on these intrepid ones, which has already a lot of events that occurs in their lives. So instead of the classic heroes of the fantasy world, which has maybe some experience with some events in his life, maybe one dramatic event, you faced a lot of troubled time in your life. And so when you became an intrepid one, you are a bit more, you have more scars than the classic heroical fantasy.
And so, who are the villains in this world?
So the villains of Blood Sword are the true magi. There is a citadel, which is called the Citadel of Krart, which is in the middle of the doomed plain of Krart. And this is the main location of the first book. But there are a lot of places in which true magi has the rule of the land. One of which is the Weird Island, which is ruled by the Warlock King, which is like a descendant of the True Mage. The True Mage once has been the ruler of all the land, and in this setting there are 5 elements, which are the classic one: fire, water, earth, and air. But the 5th one is not the light; is the darkness. The True Mage were 5 wizards, magecraft, that died in a cataclysm event, and people think that they are still alive in a sort of spiritual form, and they are walking the land of legends in order to return. They are the 2 final evil villain. We have the Krart Magi, which are the descendant of the True Magi, but they are like the lesser version of them. So they are powerful, but not so powerful.
And is there gods and deities kind of like in your traditional D&D worlds?
Well, yeah, the guiles are a bit different. Like when you have a guiles, intrepid ones have guiles, and they are the only one to get one of them. There are also other guilds for other statuses, like the nobles, but we try to depict the guiles for the intrepid ones like syndicate, more or less, and they are different from the
Not guides or guilds, gods, deities, pantheons.
Oh, gods! Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't understand.
No, that's okay.
There is a sort of major religion of the state of the empire, which is a monotheistic religion, a classic monotheistic religion, and then there are the old gods, or sometimes called the ancient gods, and people think that the ancient gods are gone, but sometimes you encounter maybe servant of a god, and he tells you no, they are still alive. But it's up to the character and player to find out the truth.
Could you be a cleric of one of those gods that may or may not exist anymore?
Yeah, you could be a cleric of ancient gods, but your power will work differently. We have some thought about the mechanics of clerics in Blood Sword, and you could also probably be a cleric of the state religion, but it will not be your power won't be magical at all. Like the medicine, like advanced medicine or stuff. You can augury things, but the main religion is not like it's like a monotheistic religion in which the god doesn't really talk with the people at all, and so the druids are more linked to the ancient god, and so even because the ancient gods are loosely based on Celtic and sometimes also on Egyptian gods, loosely based, of course.
So does magical healing work the same way, or has that been tinkered with?
We have some intrepid that have healing properties. For example, the sage, which is like a monk, has some healing properties. He learns how to manipulate the energy of the body. The healing, the magical healing, is really is really low, is really weakened in a sort of way, because first of all, whenever you cast a spell and you fail, you can get disadvantage to cast that spell again if you don't rest before. And so healers are like really more relying on medicine and on knowing the body and maybe natural resources than on magic. And that's another layer of difficulty of the game, which is really, really important.
So you kind of expand on using medicine and healing naturally. It was one of the things me and Ted were kind of talking about in 5e is like the medicine skill is actually fairly useless when it comes to doing anything related to actual medicine, or diagnosing or helping someone.
Yeah, unless you have like the healer feat, then it's useful. But yeah, otherwise not much.
I don't even think the healer feat matters. Like you can just have that and not be trained in medicine. And
I think
That's
so. I
I
think
think
probably
it's
so.
the
true. Yeah.
same.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it's really bothering me because if you have knowledge in medicine, you should
Yeah.
be able to to be more helpful. And we didn't want to do that by purpose, but in a sort of way, if you are in a grimdark world with a magic system that is more punishing you if you fail, of course people that are healers will need to rely more on medicine than on magic, and so we will have a more deep link between the medicine skill and the spell.
Yeah. I think currently in 5e, if you have the chef feat, you're more qualified to be the doctor in town than you are the guy that's maxed out the medicine
Oh my
skill.
god,
That's
the
funny.
chef the chef feats is like, it ruined a lot of my session.
Oh, that's perfect.
Nice.
I just recently got done playing a character like based off of that feat just because I think it's funny.
Mhm.
Yeah, that one, and of course the Tempest Cleric, which is like, I don't know if Ben it's from my tables or not, but it's like, it's really huge.
So Brian,
I have an what is it, a Twilight Cleric, and so they have the
Oh
Twilight
my god.
Sanctuary thing where you get a bunch of temp hit points all the time.
yeah,
It was really rough at low levels. Now that we're like mid level in that game, it's not quite as useful, but it's still useful.
yeah. When it's only a couple of hit points, it doesn't make as much of a difference. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
So Brian wants to know: were there any mechanics of Blood Sword you couldn't fit into the 5e framework?
Oh, I think so. For example, crossroads for me are like just a way to to mentally depict your way to write your adventure. I am a narrative design professor, so I am really huge in try to understand how to write my own adventure, and in a way that I can write things out, and at the same time player will not ruin my writing at the first scene. So I pass from writing all my adventure and then not writing all my adventure, and now I have this kind of methods that allows me to to make a path into a sort of branching narratives. And for me, crossroads are really useful for standard fifth edition playing. You can have a crossroads instead of an encounter with an NPC, and still you don't have too many additional rules, like for example the audience in not the audience, the I don't know the English name. In Adventure in Middle-earth there is the mechanic in which you can meet NPC and have a talk with them. um,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't remember
yeah,
what it's called though. Is it
I remember
audience?
the
Was it?
no, it's the Italian word. I'm mistaking it because it's called audienze in Italian, which is called in English. I don't know the word, but it's like a EV mechanics, a EV system. Crossroads instead allows you to, whatever is not combat. For example, enigmas, NPCs, dialogues. You can make it in a form of crossroads, and so you have from 2 to 5 scenario. Each scenario has some prerequisite to be activated by the grandmaster, and there is always one successful scenario and one failed scenario. And if your player are cheating with some high level spell, the rule of the crossroad tells you, if the player is cheating, you applied instantly the failure scenario. There is no cheating in crossroading, because I hate cheating player with a lot of high level spells.
So, and by cheating, he means like just like getting around things. Sometimes it's great.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I
it
yeah,
know.
makes
yeah,
sense. Sometimes it makes sense. You're like, okay, that totally makes sense.
yeah.
But sometimes you're like, okay, you're like abusing the system right now.
Yeah, but crossroads are really ductile, because if they're not telling you how you can achieve a scenario, they're just telling you, if this happens, the scenario activates. And it can happen at any time. You can have a feature, you can have a spell, you can have a stroke of genius. But if you're trying to to manipulate the rules in order to get the successful scenario without the necessary element, and the grandmaster is aware of it, it suddenly applied the failure scenario. So it allows you to be to have stroke of genius, but at the same time, it punishes if you try to to go around in the bad way, in a bad way.
Mhm.
That it totally makes sense, and it is definitely a part of the game. The thorn of many of the GM, is just that the players like we've even done like all video on like there's all these things that just circumnavigate all these
Yeah.
problems in D&D, and also like one of my pet peeves with 5e is like when it comes to the exploration pillar, like none of the solutions are interesting. They all just cut
Oh,
out the exploration pillar, right?
oh,
So it's
I'm
one of
so
the
glad that you say this.
yeah, well, it's one of the things that makes the ranger not as
Weak.
appealing as it's been in previous editions because it's like
Yeah.
it's not very exciting when it just makes the problem go away instead of like
Yeah.
being better at it and engaging the group with the problem. It just
Yeah.
kind
Mhm.
of doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah,
I
totally.
totally agree. I usually in my fifth edition, in all my fifth edition session, I usually take the travel rules of Adventures in Middle Earth to apply them to travel and exploration because I really I really enjoy exploring things out, and fifth edition does not have great rules in exploring things out, and it's really sad things because my favorite class are in this order: rogue, druid, and ranger, followed by warlock, which is the fifth edition. For me, it's as like a fifth edition magical thief. And so when I play rogue and ranger, but also druid, I really enjoy exploring. But in fifth edition, sometimes the rules like, okay, it's solved. Well,
Uh,
it's not interesting at all.
the Middle Earth journey rules are very interesting,
Yeah,
and they're also kind of brutal because it's like you could like almost die just trying to get there. On
yeah,
in like the way it's set up, it reminds me of like a fourth edition skill challenge.
Mhm.
I know the one game of that I played in, it's like we did moderately well. Like we didn't do terrible, but we didn't do awesome, and we still all ended up, going into the dungeon part of the adventure with a level of exhaustion. Uh,
my God.
yeah. So and then you like me, the player was kind of like maybe we should take a rest before we go into the dungeon. But me, the character, is like, oh, we're here. We have a thing to get done. So you just suck at everything
Hmm,
because
okay.
it's funny the way 5e is with like it is such a forgiving system, except for
Mhm.
like this one thing off to the side called
Yeah,
exhaustion, which is
Exhaustion.
just so
Yep. Yep.
brutal.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
so brutal. Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, we are just past the hour mark. Any final thoughts before we head out?
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for having me. I was really excited to be on live. I follow you on YouTube, and sometimes I follow your live too, and so it's been great. And I hope you can join our journey with Blood Sword Fifth Edition, which is a really huge take. It's a new take on the Blood Sword series, and you can follow me on Twitter and ask me anything about it.
And Robert?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been it's been a while since I've been on, but thanks for having me, and I'm excited. I love again these grimdark kind of settings, and so I'm excited to run some Blood Sword. I'll be running some for one of the original creators. I'm also looking for a couple of other game masters. So if you like the idea of Blood Sword, tomorrow, like Daniele said, we're going to release the quick start. So if you check that out, if you're really interested and you want to run it. We're going to be pulling a couple of game masters to run games and paying them.
Where can they find those quick start rules once they're released?
Well, there is a link on the website, and you can also find them in the Facebook group. We will post them in a post in the Facebook group in the Italian and in the English international one. And there will be a Kickstarter in two languages, in Italian and in English, so you can find them in both languages.
Awesome. Thank you both for coming on. Really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.